When working with dependencies, Vue.js also has another way of doing this. We're using a computed property right now. I can also use yet another property on the Vue.js instance, the watch object. So that's another new object we're learning about right now. In computed, we set up the property, and then as a function, we set up the logic how this property should be computed. For watch, it kind of works the other way around. Here, as a key, I set up the property name I want to watch. For example, counter. So this has to match one of my properties. In this case, the data property counter here. Then, as a function, I specify the code I want to execute whenever the counter changes. And I pass, or Vue.js automatically passes, the value of this upcoming change to this function. This allows me to react to changes, and therefore here I could also set a global output variable if I would have that and if it wasn't computed as it is here, and set this up the other way around, which certainly will work, though I will tell you right away that it is a best practice to use computed properties wherever you can, simply because they are more optimized. Due to this caching and so on, it really allows Vue.js to run more optimal, to avoid unnecessary tasks. Though there are cases where you need to react to every change. Also, there is another case where computed properties won't do the trick, and that is if you need asynchronous tasks to be run. Computed properties always need to run synchronously, which means you're returning something here and that needs to happen as soon as possible or immediately. There is no way you can reach out to a server or do some other asynchronous task in between. If you need to run such a task, or as I just mentioned before, you need to run some other code which really is triggered when a property updates and which is not solved by a computed property, then watch is for you. So here we might simply want to reset the counter after, let's say, 2 seconds. So I'll add a timeout here and I'll say that after 2 seconds I want to execute this first function here. Now important, since this is now a closure in this callback here, I have to store my Vue instance in a separate variable. So this, which allows me to conveniently access my properties and so on, needs to be stored in a variable. Because whilst it is available with this all throughout in my default Vue.js objects and functions here, this is not the case for a callback closure like this one here. So here I can then call VM, but now again, just like before, access counter and set it to 0 to reset it after 2 seconds. With this in place, if I now hit Control, I'll rapidly increase the counter and we see it go back to 0 after 2 seconds. Because we had watch in place, which will be called whenever the counter changes, thus executing this code and, as you see here, able of executing a synchronous task. The reason for this, of course, is that here I'm not returning anything. Here I'm not setting a property which needs to be recalculated. Here I'm simply specifying some code which should be run whenever some property we set up here as a key changes. In this case, the counter.